Yo, what is up guys, it's Fanfic Reader here, and today we are continuing on with our Avengers of Steel story. Hope you all enjoy. Now let's get into it. Avengers of Steel, Chapter 3, Moving Forward. Clark was wrong. It had not been a good day. He had been all over town, sometimes making liberal uses of his speed to beat the traffic, visiting every single newspaper he could find. He began with a very selective list, trying his luck with newspapers he dreamed of working at. Sooner rather than later, he realised that maybe he would be more successful if he aimed a little lower. Just thinking about it made his head hurt. The Daily Bugle building earlier that day. "Who are you again?" asked John Jonah Jameson, barely looking at him while he shuffled through papers on his table, a cigar lit in his mouth. "We have no place here for a reporter. What I need is a photographer. Can you do that?" "I can take pictures, yes," Clark answered, slowly. By that point he had already realised that whatever he could get here was a profit. "Then you are worth something. Let me clue you in on a little secret, kid. I'm surrounded by idiots." Given that he was young, that at Clark, he didn't really think it was such a closely guarded secret. "People think of these so-called heroes out there protecting them," he continued. "They think that these Avengers give a crap about what's happening in this city. I'm here to clarify to you that they don't. This whole shitstorm with those aliens and that maniac with the horns was their fault. But they made all this theatre happen. Do you know why?" Clark didn't answer, but he was sure Jameson would tell him. "For fame!" he howled. "Just so they could be hailed as heroes, and then, when everyone gets their hopes up, those poor bastards turn to starstruck fans. That's when they act." "Act how?" He couldn't resist asking. "They take power!" Jameson yelled. "They make themselves a symbol of everything that is right in the world, so that when someone disagrees, they are automatically wrong. They're a menace." He slapped the table with both hands, his eyes shining with an angry glow. "I've seen through their ruse, and I will unmask them." Clark couldn't really speak right now. He was completely stunned into silence. "I want pictures of the Avengers. That's what you can do, boy. Bring pictures of them showing their real colours and I'll pay you." The word pay, for his eternal shame, shocked him into motion. "How much?" he asked before he could stop himself. $50. 25 if they're not perfect. Leave now. Not all of us are unemployed." That had been one kind of experience, and would remain just the one. If he had anything else to say about that, he couldn't imagine the kind of selfless, patient and humble soul it would take for someone to enjoy that manner on a daily basis. He grabbed his burger from the plate and took a bite. At least the food was good. The place he was at wasn't that bad at all. A little bar, good music, a few people drinking and laughing at the tables. Not a bad place to end the day and go home. Because even if his body wasn't feeling it, his mind was tired from the long and unsuccessful day. Well, maybe not all that unsuccessful. The New York Bulletin building, earlier that day. "Look, Clark, we just can't hire anybody right now," said Mitchell Elson, editor-in-chief of the New York Bulletin. "It's really not a matter of want, but a matter of can't. I read the articles you gave me, and they are good. You have talent. But we are being forced to work with less and less people every day just to make ends meet." He took off his glasses and sighed. "The truth is, we are hanging on by our fingertips. The newspapers are dying. Everybody wants news immediately. They want to take their cell phones and read. And they want the news updated as fast as it happens. Nobody wants to buy a printed newspaper every morning, just so half of what they read isn't relevant anymore by the end of the day." Clark could feel that man really meant what he was saying. It wasn't just some excuse to turn him down. "I understand, sir. About you not being able to hire me, I mean," Clark said, getting up. "But I disagree with you. What you do, what you want to do, is as relevant as ever. Maybe more than it ever was. Everybody wants fast news, that's true. And there are thousands of media vehicles ready to deliver them. But put those newses to a test, and if you find that 1% that is true, then you get lucky. What you do is bring true, real proof based on news every day, and that is as important as it ever has been." He pushed the chair back into place and smiled. "It's a shame that you don't have a place for me now, but I hope you will one day. It's been a pleasure, Mr. Elson." He shook Elson's hand and turned, and then he heard Elson sigh again. "Clark, hold on." Clark looked at him again. "We can't hire you now, but I can buy stories from a freelancer," he pointed at Clark. "Bring me something worth reading, with all the proof to back it up, and I'll buy it from you." He shrugged. "It's not a perfect solution," Elson added, "but it's what I can do now. The number I gave you, do you have it? If you find something of value, give me a call, day or night. I don't really sleep much anyway." It really was a pity that Mr. Elson couldn't hire him, Clark thought, biting his burger again. From every person he met today, he felt that Mr. Elson was the one who believed in what his career represented. He had a little problem with his belief, that was true, but deep down Clark felt he knew what was important. He was so distracted about everything that happened that he only noticed someone was close when an enormous shadow came over him. "Can I see some ID?" asked a deep voice. Clark raised his eyes to see a huge man behind him, and in that rare moment, Clark actually felt small. Tall, bald, dark-skinned, and built like a bull. The man targeting him was even bigger than he was, with muscles so massive that Clark wondered the amount of food and exercise it would take just to keep them up. "Sure, just a second," he finally said, digging through his pockets and fishing out his ID. "Here." The man looked at him for a moment and gave it back, opening a bottle of beer and putting it beside his plate. "I didn't," Clark began, only to be interrupted. "It's on the house." "You look like you need it," he said, raising his hand. "I'm Luke. I own the bar." Clark quickly cleaned his hands with his napkin and shook the man's hand. "Clark, and thanks, that's very nice of you." It wouldn't work, of course, since he was immune to alcohol, but it was the thought that counted. "So what's eating you?" Luke asked, cleaning a few glasses. "Girl problems?" He chuckled. "Need a girl for that," Luke smiled. "No, my problem is more basic. I moved here today and I can't find a job. Nobody's hiring in this economy, apparently." Luke nodded, sagely. "It's not easy for anybody. Where you from?" "Smallville." His eyes rose a little bit. "Is that a real town? Or are you actually from a small ville?" "It's real," Clark answered. He waited a bit and added, "And pretty much yes." Luke snorted. "How are you adapting?" "Well, the apartment I'm renting is pretty much a dump. One of my neighbors is a drug addict and I'm almost certain the other one is crazy. I don't have a job and my money won't last till the end of the month." Clark took a swig of the beer. Other than that, I like the city. I honestly didn't think I would like it that much. It's alive, you know what I mean?" "I do," Luke agreed. "It's like the city has a life of its own and the people are in it just to be a part of it." "Yeah." Clark finished his burger and drank another sip. "I just hope that I don't have to leave it so soon." "So what do you do anyway?" Luke asked. "Journalist. Or at least I want to be. No one's hiring though. I think I'm going to have to work by myself, at least for a while. Freelance. One of the editors said he would buy a story from me if I found one." "Do you have a story?" "Nope. And to be honest, I don't even know where to start looking for one. I mean, should I go for politics? Or something more down to earth? Like the reconstruction of Hell's Kitchen? Or just wait for Tony Stark to make a bombastic revelation to the press again?" Luke laughed in a deep voice and then looked at Clark. "Pop used to say the only direction in life that matters is forward. You already know what you have to do, you just have to find a way to do it." Clark considered what he said. "That's actually a pretty simple way of looking at things." "Smart too." "Well, that's Pop for you," Luke chuckled. "Sometimes you just have to let another set of eyes look at the problem." He finished his beer and picked up his wallet to pay for his dinner. "Thanks for the talk. And the beer. Next time I come back, introduce me to Pop. He sounds like someone I would like to meet." Luke smiled. "If I can drag him here someday, I will. Good night." With that, he said his goodbyes and left the bar. The streets were much quieter now than they had been during the day. Since there was no one around, the wind was chilly, but it didn't bother him, of course. Not when he could withstand Arctic winds without feeling cold. Luke's words were still in his mind, and he realized that the guy was right. He knew what he had to do. Now was just a matter of finding out how to do it. He was basically halfway there. Distracted by his thoughts, Clark was a bit surprised when a van passed on his side. Running a lot more than it should, he stopped and looked at it until the van was at the end of the street, and then it drove into a sidewalk right in front of a homeless man, and two masked men got out of the back and hit him in the head. Boy, did they have bad timing. It was an easy job. Get out of the van, beat some poor drunk or high bastard, throw him in the van and drive away. No fuss, no muss, just make a quick grab and sell kind of deal. Of course, plans don't always go as advertised. This was one of those times. Before anyone could realise what was going on, there was a dry thud, and one of the men was down. Nobody saw anything. Nobody had any kind of signal as to what was going on. One of the masked men simply jerked their head to the side as if something hit them, and then fell down. Everyone stopped for a second, their brains trying to process what just happened. That was when a blow hit the second masked man, throwing him onto his back, far away from the homeless person he was still trying to drag into the van. To his credit, even as scared as he was, the man had a good sense of pulling his gun and pointing it at the direction he had saw the moving shape. The act of taking his hand to his waist and grabbing the gun took about 2 seconds. But when he pointed it, there was nothing there anymore. Instead, he felt something holding him from behind, and before he could even think, he was pulled and thrown to the side of the van. The impact was so strong the van shook. The masked man didn't see anything anymore. The third man, the driver, saw all that happen from inside the car. He didn't really understand it, the adrenaline making all the details a little hazy. But that small part of his brain that had survived millennia of evolution was screaming one thing at him. Run! Without caring for his partners, who were unconscious on the street, the man turned the van and pressed the gas pedal as if his life depended on it. It wasn't exactly a fast car, and it took a little time to gain speed. All the while, the driver kept watching the thing that was attacking them in the mirror. It wasn't following, until it simply vanished, and appeared right in front of the van. He didn't have time or ability to react. The van simply crashed against his pursuer. But instead of running over it, instead of throwing it to the side, the vehicle behaved as if it hit a steel wall. The noise of metal bending against an immovable object thudded across the night. It wasn't that bad of a crash. For all his despair, the van simply hadn't managed to gather much speed. But it was enough to make him hit the wheel with his head and make him all dizzy. Probably broke some ribs. Groaning, he lifted his eyes to look through the cracked windshield. The thing was there, completely unscratched, appearing to not have moved a single inch. And then he wasn't there anymore, and he felt a hand grab him from behind. Before he could even scream, the thing lifted him up with incredible force, and he clashed against the ceiling face first, and had to close his eyes when he was dragged against it, the metal burning against his forehead. When he was in the middle of the van, it stopped. He remained there, in the air, facing the ceiling, while the creature held him with apparently no effort at all. The pressure was beginning to push the air from his lungs. "Who are you?" the thing asked, his voice sounding disturbingly normal. "Shit, shit, shit," he chanted, panicking. The pressure became stronger, and he had to turn his face to the side so his nose wouldn't break. "If I have to ask again, I will begin to push," the thing said. "Then we will see what breaks first, the ceiling or you." "Turk! Turk Barrett!" he yelled before the thing decided to crush him again. "Why were you kidnapping that man?" the thing asked. He didn't answer for a while, having literally forgotten about that. "For cash. They pay us to bring people to them. It doesn't matter who, you just pick them up and take them there. Junkies, drunks, homeless, people no one will miss." "Who pays you?" "Man, if I tell you, they'll kill me." "I'd worry more about the present," the thing said, putting even more pressure on his back. "I don't know who they are, I swear. Don't ask, don't tell, right? But I can tell you where they are." "Where?" If I tell you, will you let me go?" he asked. The excruciating pain on his back was answer enough. "My pocket! The address is in my pocket!" He felt a hand take something from his pocket, and then the thing let him down. He fell heavily on the ground, and before he could even think about moving, the thing crouched over him. Its eyes were glowing red. "Now listen to me carefully," it said, the heat from his eyes making him sweat. "You're going to pick your friends and drive to the nearest police station. And then you're going to surrender your illegal weapons and confess to every crime you ever did." The thing approached even more, their faces practically touching. "If you don't, if you make one turn on a street that isn't the way to the police station, I will catch up, fold this van like a can of tuna, and throw it all the way to the station. And I don't really care how badly the landing will be. You saw how fast I am. You saw how strong I am. Don't test me." Looking into those red eyes, the last thing on his mind was to disobey. "I swear to God, I'll go to the police. Let me go, please." He didn't even notice when the thing left. He just felt, a few seconds later, the unconscious bodies of his friend crashing up against the inside of the van and the doors closing. He has never willingly drove so fast to the police station in his entire life. If there was one thing Clark didn't like, it was people like those men, who would so willingly destroy someone's life just for their own gain. No matter how small, it was disgusting, and it made him question if those people were simply rotten to the core, or if they were once good people and somehow, for some reason, they became like that over time. He just didn't know. He sighed and looked at the piece of paper he had taken from the man, all the while hearing the sound of the van to make sure that it would really go to the police. He had made a promise, after all. So maybe he wouldn't really toss the van all the way to the police station, but he would definitely fold that thing around them and personally drop it to the police. The people had an address and the time written on it. It was a place where they would drop the kidnapped people, and from there they would probably change locations. So the only option he had, if he wanted to save those people, was to go to that place before they were sent somewhere else. Well, it looks like his night was far from over, and that he had maybe found a good story for publishing. Who would have thought? Some nights, Jessica Jones had trouble sleeping. Or, it was more accurate to say, some nights Jessica Jones didn't have trouble sleeping. Peaceful dreaming was an ancient memory by this point, and the mere act of closing her eyes brought forth things she would rather not think about. The booze helped. It dulled reality for a while, made it bearable, but it was just a short-term solution. And since she had a faster metabolism and a higher rate of healing, it was an even shorter short-term solution for her. So when sleep refused to come, Jessica worked. She followed cheating spouses across town, taking pictures as proof, trying to at least for a moment make herself believe that some people were just as fucked up as she was. On the nights she didn't have to work though, Jessica always ended up on one place. Fire escape right in front of Luke's bar. What began as a way to keep tabs on a man whose wife she was forced to murder had quickly evolved into something else. Jessica didn't really have a word for it. Fact was, she realised that it somehow calmed her. Seeing his routine, serving drinks, talking with his clients, occasionally taking a woman to his apartment on the second floor of the bar. She wasn't thrilled about what she was doing. She knew she was invading his privacy. The people she followed for her clients she could justify to herself, since she was hired and they were obviously doing nothing good. But Luke was just living his life, following an everyday route, moving on. He was just a good man. Maybe that was the reason she liked to watch him so much. The night was pretty much like all the others she watched him, at least in the beginning. Luke opened the bar, the clients arrived, he served the drinks and food. Nothing out of the ordinary. Until one person entered the bar. A person she knew, but had never saw there. It took her a moment to realise she was looking at her new neighbour, the guy who arrived that very day, together with a real estate agent. It was a small surprise, but the guy needed a place to eat, she supposed. Nothing wrong with that. She saw him order a burger and sit there quietly for a while, apparently thinking very hard about something. Luke brought him a beer, they talked for a bit, and he left. All very normal. What wasn't normal was the van driving fast on an empty street just as he walked out. What also wasn't normal were the men that got out of the van and tried to kidnap some guy. And what was even less normal was the sight of her neighbour running so fast he basically disappeared on a blur. The sight of him knocking down the kidnappers and the sight of him stopping the moving vehicle just by standing in front of it. For a moment, Jessica thought she had drunk a bit too much. She didn't even notice her jaw dropping or the fact that her flask was upside down, the cheap liquor falling out. It was only when she unconsciously let the flash drop that the sound snapped her back into action. That was unbelievable. But it was real. She knew she wasn't drunk enough to imagine that. Her neighbour was like her. Except a little bit stronger and a little bit tougher, she forced herself to admit. For one embarrassing moment that Jessica made sure to suppress quickly and hard, she felt a pang of fear. The last time she saw someone like her, someone gifted, well, saying that things hadn't ended up well was like saying water was wet. But this guy was different, she thought. At least he seemed to be. He didn't have to help that dude, and yet he did. Just like she would have done once upon a time. Her curiosity was piqued. It was time to go back. Just not to her apartment. As a good private investigator, Jessica would take this chance to learn a little bit more, just in case her neighbour ended up being a little less like her and more like him. And if she was being nosy, well, it wasn't like staying there taking pictures of Luke would change that. Natasha arrived in New Mexico later than she would have liked. It took her more than calculated to put her pressing matters in order so she could finally go. She couldn't even talk to Clint before embarking. She hoped he wouldn't pout when he got her message, but knowing him, he probably would. Darcy Lewis was the one who answered the door and let her into the lab, wearing robes and slippers, her mess of her hair enough evidence that she was only just out of bed. That and the irritated and tired look behind her glasses. "Really? This couldn't have waited until tomorrow?" Darcy asked. "I'm sorry," Natasha apologized. "I really am, but I'm sure you'd understand why I need to move as quickly as possible." "But why now? We already told you guys everything that happened. It's been months." They walked through the dark lab while talking, Natasha stepping with grace and speed while following a sluggish Darcy, who apparently was having trouble with talking and moving at the same time. "S.H.I.E.L.D. has been looking for that ship all this time," she explained. They considered following the man a waste of resources, given that he and the ship were probably together. It was a bad move. "So now they got you on the case," Darcy stated. "Well, I don't know what else you want to hear, but sure. I guess we can tell it again." Saying that, Darcy turned to a wall and turned on the lights. The form of Jane Foster appeared, sleeping on a chair, her head held by the whiteboard full of equations in front of her. Natasha raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, she's been doing that a lot lately," Darcy chimed. "Usually she has a half-eaten sandwich on her lap, but I guess today she wanted to look pretty for the guests. And then she clapped really loud. Jane jerked away, hitting her head on the board. "Jane, dear, Miss Widow is here." "What?" Jane slurred, looking around. Natasha took pity on her and walked closer, pulling up a chair. "Dr. Foster? I called today, remember?" she said, sitting down. "I wanted to ask you a few questions about the alien ship." Jane rubbed her eyes and nodded. "I remember. Sorry, I must have fallen asleep." "Sleeping 10 minutes here and 15 minutes there isn't sleeping, Jane," Darcy protested, also sitting down. "You have to stop moping around. Things are getting unsanitary already. There was a rat on your shoulders yesterday. I mean, I managed to toss him out with a broom, but it's only a matter of time before another one shows up." "A rat?" "That was Jerry!" Jane exclaimed, suddenly awake. "He was a lab rat. My lab rat." Well, my bad." Darcy stuttered an apology. "But I'm sure he'll be back, right? I mean, lab rats are really smart. Like Brian, from the cartoon, remember?" "Pink, not so much, but there's a 50-50 chance." She frowned. suddenly thinking about something. What the hell were you doing with a lab rat anyway? You're an astrophysicist. Jane blushed a little. I was feeling lonely. He helped. Natasha tapped her finger on the table. If she didn't interrupt, she noticed she wouldn't leave tonight. Girls, please, the sooner we end this, the sooner you can go back to sleeping. Both of them turned to Natasha, as if they had forgotten she was there. Right, yes, of course, Jane said, sitting straight. What would you like to know? Like I said on the phone, I read the report S.H.I.E.L.D. made after interviewing you, but since I'm actually trying to find this person now, I would like to ask my own questions. So if you could tell me what happened in detail, it would help. Dr. Foster nodded as she collected her thoughts. 3.5 months ago, I was contacted by the American Army for a consultation about an object that they found. Understandably, they couldn't tell me more over the phone, so they sent someone here to explain that the Canadians found something under the ice, on a place called Ellesmere Island. Something they suspected that was not from this planet. Funny how normal it became after the Battle of New York to admit that something could be alien. People were often mocked at best if they dared to suggest that thing before. She nodded, so Jane would continue. I tried to explain that this wasn't my field, that I wasn't an expert on anything alien, but no one is, concluded Natasha. Exactly. I at least talked to one, so I guess that makes me kind of an expert, Jane chuckled. Talked, huh? Interrupted Darcy, smiling. Is this how you kids are calling it today? Talk? Dr. Foster blushed hard. Anyway, I talked to S.H.I.E.L.D., and they didn't mind if I took 1 month from my research to go on this little expedition, so I agreed. The pay was good, and I was curious as to what they found. No, S.H.I.E.L.D. wouldn't mind that at all, Natasha thought, since they wanted to know what that thing was too. We both got there a few days later, Jane continued, and they gave us some of the information they had about it. Apparently the ice around it was 20,000 years old, and it was emitting a signal, which was how they managed to find it in the first place. What kind of signal? I don't know, but whatever it was, it stopped after the ship took off, Jane answered. After that, we took our stuff to our tent and waited. We didn't really have anything to do then until they managed to take the object out of the ice, which was completely boring, Darcy added. Thus why I suggested we take a look around. After those annoying soldiers were out of the way anyway. Jane nodded guiltily. So when night fell, we got out to take a close look. You can imagine how cold it was. If we died there, no one would have found our bodies until spring. Probably, at least. It was a stupid idea, so we decided to go back. That was when we saw one of the guys who worked for Arctic Cargo, the same one who had taken our things out the plane. How can you be sure it was the same guy? Inquired Natasha. Trust me, answered Darcy. There was no forgetting a guy that hot. Even Jane agrees with me. Given how she was blushing, that was probably true. It doesn't matter how hot he was or wasn't, the problem was that he was wearing a t-shirt. No coat, no gloves, just a t-shirt. And in that weather, his fingers would have fallen off in minutes if he got out of his tent. Now that was interesting. We got curious, so we followed him. Ellesmere Island, 3.5 months ago. Jane and Darcy tried to follow the man as quietly and quickly as they could, which proved to be harder than they thought on the amount of snow they were stepping on and the amount of clothes that were rustling together as they walked. But on the upside, the howling wind made it difficult to hear, so the guy probably wouldn't be able to hear them. He was clearly going down the wall of the ice where the ship was trapped, so when they lost sight of him, that's where they headed. It wasn't easy, holding onto frozen rocks and trying not to fall to their deaths in the raging sea, but they managed. The surprising thing was, the 20,000-year-old wall of ice wasn't as impenetrable as they thought. There was a tunnel in it. Both of them stopped to look at it, going so far as to forget about the cold and the height they were at for a minute. Jane was stunned. There was simply no way that the army had dug that tunnel in such a short amount of time, without some serious equipment to do it, and on the side of the very cliff. What the hell? Exclaimed Darcy, conveying exactly what Jane was thinking. She touched the wall of the tunnel. It looks like it was melted. It did. But by what? A laser? What kind of laser could melt a wall of ice that thick? And with this kind of precision? And without making a sound? Jane's scientist mind was working overtime trying to make sense of this. Darcy, much more practical, simply walked towards the tunnel. She felt like she was in the depths of the sea walking under all that ice. There was no wind there, and the sound was muffled. The light of the flashlight glowing against the walls, it was like another world entirely. And that's when they saw it. The mysterious object. An alien ship in all its glory. Even Darcy stopped moving for a second. While they tried to take the view in, the ship was huge, encrusted into the ice, like it was a sculpted mountain of steel. Beautiful and, at the same time, clearly not from Earth. In silence they walked towards it, wide-eyed, until they found the entrance. The inside of the ship was even more impressive. Surrounded by the alien metal, both of them followed the corridors, the weak lights doing little to stop them from looking around, trying to make sense of this weird environment, until they crossed an open door and saw an odd floating robot. The robot didn't move when they approached, just kept itself in the air. They looked at each other, smiling, amazed by what they were seeing. Darcy fumbled with her thick clothes and managed to pick up his cell phone, pointing it at the funny-looking robot. "Say cheese," Darcy said, grinning. Jane's own smile began to disappear when the robot seemed to open and start vibrating, like an angry wasp. "Darcy, no!" she yelled, pushing her friend to the side just at the moment the robot lashed out with a strange metal tentacle that hit her. It missed Darcy but hit Jane in the stomach, throwing her into the air, until she was knocked against the wall. It hurt so much that she could barely breathe, the adrenaline that was running through her veins as she tried to get away. Darcy ran to her, putting herself between her and the robot, that ridiculous taser in her hand. And then he was. The man they were following, the man who supposedly worked for Arctic Cargo. And even in the pain as she was, panicked as she was, she couldn't keep herself from watching as he grabbed the robot, fighting against it as it struggled, his fingers sinking into the metal, and he pulled it. She could only hear as the metal was torn apart, the sound echoing and nattering through the corridors, folding the metal as if it were paper. He gave the robot a last look as he tossed it to the ground, possibly still asserting if it was a threat, and then looked at them. "Don't even think about it, pal," Darcy warned him, shaking her taser as if she could actually do anything. The man simply raised his hands, a universal sign that he didn't want to fight, and started walking towards them. "It's alright," he said, his voice calm as if he were trying to tame a horse. "It's alright, I'm not going to hurt you." Jane was trying to keep herself from passing out and Darcy was shaking like a leaf, but neither of them did anything. He approached, his hands still held, and crouched over Jane, ignoring the taser right in front of him. He moved slowly, making sure he didn't startle them, and opened Jane's coat. He sighed and looked at her.
"You're hemorrhaging internally,"
he said, giving her one look.
"And if I don't cauterize this bleed,
How can... I can
do things that other people can't."
He answered and offered her his hand.
"Hold my hand. This is gonna hurt."
He looked down and his eyes started to glow red. Jane was still screaming when she passed out. Natasha was silent for a moment as she digested the story they told her, trying to look past all the amazing things and analyse the details. She looked at Jane. "May I?" she asked. Jane nodded, understanding, and lifted her shirt, and there it was. There was the burn mark of a cauterized wound, proof of the story they just told her. "He saved my life," said Jane, letting her shirt fall down. "But damn if it didn't hurt." "Scared the crap out of me," added Darcy, sounding serious for once. "I really thought we were done for." Jane just held Darcy's hand for a second, as if reassuring her. "So what happened then?" asked Natasha, looking at Darcy. "Well, it didn't take him long to finish up cauterizing the wounds," she answered. "And then he just looked at me, told me she was going to be fine, and picked me and Jane up before I could even say anything. And then he ran." Now, when I say he ran, I mean he ran. All I saw was a blur. Then suddenly we were back in our tent and he was gone. It wasn't long until the tremor started and the ship flew off. Natasha stayed in silence once again, contemplating everything she just learned, trying to form a clear picture of the man she was chasing. So far, all she had were physical attributes: appearance, strength, speed, the ability to shoot energy from his eyes. But now, perhaps she had just learned something new. She had learned that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't a bad guy after all. He had no reason to save their lives, if he was an alien, which was pretty much confirmed at this point. And stealing an alien ship from under the nose of two different armies, why would he risk himself by leaving a witness? Why would he save both women that had seen his face? That could give the army clues as to who he was. If he just left them, Natasha doubted she would have enough clues to even start an investigation. But he did save them, and that told Natasha that he had a conscience. Maybe that was something she could use. Natasha got up from her chair. "Thank you for your help," she said. "I believe you gave me something to go on." And with that, she said her goodbyes and turned to leave. But then stopped again, as if remembering something, and looked at Jane. "Jane?" The girl looked at her. I may not have known Thor for a long time, but I fought by his side. Even then, when his own brother was attacking Earth, he managed to tell us a little bit about you. So I can tell with absolute certainty that if he isn't here by your side, it's because he can't be. He loves you. Never think otherwise. Now, her good deed of the year done, Natasha left. She had an alien to find. Okay guys, Chapter 3 ends here for Avengers of Steel. I want to thank you all very much for listening in. And I want to thank all of you again for the big subscriber boon I've had since last chapter, but I know that's mainly due to getting a shout out from the author in his latest chapter of Avengers of Steel, which was very, very cool, by the way. Can't wait to see how the X-Men fit into all this. So yeah, I want a big thank you to all of you. And I just want to make one little announcement. As I'm sure most of you have noticed, the pictures, like the picture book thing I'm kind of going for with this channel is a little bit, it's not the best. The reason for that is I'm simply using Google Images here. So I was wondering if any of you knew a good picture editor that I could use to make these videos a bit more animated, a bit more, I don't know, a bit more fun to look at as well as listen to, please let me know in the comments down below. If there's any other stories you want me to read out, then again, let me know in the comments down below. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next chapter.